Hello friends, welcome back to the 17 square meters garden. If you're new here, I'm Dominika, and today we have a couple of things to do in the garden. These are always on my March to-do list because by completing them now, I make sure that my garden is ready for this new upcoming season. I know that my plants wake up from their dormancy and they are set off to a good start, and I also avoid any potential problems that could appear later in the season. So let me just grab the rest of my supplies and we can start with the first task. What I always start with in my garden is I check if any plants need repotting. I try to repot my plants every 2 to 3 years because when we grow plants in pots, they only have that small amount of soil and that small space to grow in. It's not like in a real garden where they can spread their roots in search for water and nutrients. Here they grow in a restricted environment, so the roots, they still continue to grow and they start to turn around the pot, around themselves, creating a compaction. So it's a good idea to repot your plants every 2 to 3 years. But I'm gonna share a tip with you. I don't always repot my plants into a larger container. Quite the opposite. Most of the time, I keep the same container and I repot the plants into the same containers. So how I do it? I take the plant out of its pot, shake off any excess soil, and then I trim the root ball by about 1/3. This is called root pruning. This isn't gonna hurt your plant. Quite the opposite. It reinvigorates your plant, removes the compaction, and gives your plant more space to grow. Then I refill the container with a little bit of extra soil and plant my plant back into the same pot. So I do it every 2 to 3 years. I do it with all of my trees and shrubs. Obviously, if I start with a small shrub, if I have a new shrub, then I start with a smaller pot and then I increase the size of the container as the plant grows. But with many trees and shrubs, they're like these tuyas, they are not gonna grow much bigger, so I keep them in these pots, and these are gonna be their final pots. And these pots are size appropriate for the plant, so there's really no need to increase the size of the container. The same for my Japanese maples. These grow pretty slow, so these are their final pots, and I'm just gonna repot them, root prune them a little bit every couple of years, and I can grow them in the same pots for years and years to come. Speaking of this Japanese maple, I had my pine cone bird feeders here, and the seeds from the bird feeders fell into the pot and they started to sprout, and there's like a ton of things growing in here right now, and I had no idea there's such a thing as no sprout bird seeds. So I'm definitely buying this next year because I have a ton of random things. I think these are radishes actually, sprouting all over the place. So let me just quickly remove this because it starts to look a little bit ridiculous at this point. All right, next thing that I'm gonna do in my March container garden is early pest prevention. Those of you who have been following me for a while know that I don't use any pesticides in my garden because pesticides, both chemical and organic, are non-selective. So they kill the pest, but they also kill beneficial creatures. And my garden is wildlife and pollinator friendly, so I don't spray anything on my plants. I also say, I know that I repeat that all the time, but I like to say this, that you have to tolerate some pests in your garden if you want to have a healthy garden. There's a really cute proverb that says if something is not munching on your plants, your garden is not part of the ecosystem. And that's so true, because you have to have some pests in your garden because they are part of the food chain. They provide food for the beneficial creatures. So there's a ton of pests that I tolerate in my garden. I don't bother. But then there are certain pests that can do a ton of damage in a very short period of time. And one of those pests are vine weevil grubs. If you have ever seen those black beetles munch on your plant in the middle of the night in summer, these are pretty harmless, but they lay eggs by midsummer, and those eggs hatch into vine weevil grubs. And vine weevil grubs can eat the entire root system of your plants in a matter of weeks. And they are especially attracted by potted plants. This is a big problem in container gardens, and it's a problem that's going to come back over and over again. So it's an issue that you will have to address probably every single year. So I usually address that issue by late summer, but last summer, by the end of last summer, I wasn't here, so I didn't do anything about them. But usually I try to address that issue late summer, and then I apply once again my pest prevention in the spring. So because I didn't do it last summer, I have a big problem right now. While I was repotting some of my plants, I noticed a ton of vine weevil grubs. So what I'm gonna do I'm gonna apply parasitic nematodes. These are vine weevil grubs specific, so they only target vine weevil grubs. These are microscopic worms that are gonna paralyze those vine weevil grubs. I do have a whole video about vine weevil grubs. I don't want this video to take too long, so if you also deal with vine weevil grubs, you can check out that video for more information and more tips on how to apply those nematodes for this method to be effective and to get rid of all the vine weevil grubs in your garden. Well, that's what I'm gonna do right now. All right, so this is how it looks. They are in a powder form that you dissolve in your watering can. All right, now vine weevil grubs, they have their preferences. They are especially attracted by potted shrubs, especially fruit shrubs like blueberries, raspberries, gooseberries, and all kinds of things. And herbaceous perennials. They don't really attack trees. Well, in my experience, they don't really go for trees or annual plants. They like perennial plants and shrubs. So I'm gonna apply a little bit everywhere. Parasitic nematodes are a really effective way to get rid of vine weevil grubs, but keep in mind that they are living organisms, so there's a couple of, well, I don't want to say rules, but a couple of, well, rules that have to be respected for them to be the most successful and for them to help you get rid of vine weevil grubs. Like, there is a specific nematode that you need to use a specific time of the year to apply them at the right temperatures and all that. It's not complicated, it's just a couple of things to take in consideration when you apply them, and that's the kind of tips I share with you in my video on vine weevil grubs. Mid-March, when the temperatures start to warm up, when the plants start to wake up from their dormancy and they start actively growing, I also start fertilizing them. In the spring, I keep it pretty simple. I only use 2 fertilizers, Alga Grow and Alga Bloom. These are both organic fertilizers. Alga Grow is for the growth phase, Alga Bloom is for the flowering phase. And these are my main fertilizers. This is something I've been using for as long as I have my balcony garden, I guess. So I'm gonna start with the Alga Grow. In summer, I like to use a couple of additives as well, but in the spring, I keep it simple. There's also one product that I'm gonna add today, something that I discovered recently and I'm very curious to give it a try. It's called Sensi-Zyme, and oops, I wasn't closed properly. So Sensi-Zyme these are basically enzymes that help to recycle the nutrients in the soil, so they help to decompose any organic matter and dead plant debris in the soil and transform them into nutrients available to your plant. So I'm gonna add a little bit of that. I'm not even measuring today, but probably will be wiser to measure. Just gonna mix. So I'm not gonna fertilize the plants that I just watered with the nematodes. I could, because I use organic fertilizers, so these don't harm the soil microorganisms, but just in case, I'm gonna fertilize everything else. So all of my trees and shrubs and plants that did not get nematodes today. So I use Alga Grow on all of my trees and shrubs and plants that are not flowering. And then I'm gonna use Alga Bloom to fertilize all of my flowering plants, like my pansies and all the plants that are gonna flower in the spring. So any spring flowering shrubs, spring bulbs and stuff like that. And it's really important to fertilize your potted plants because, as we said earlier, these plants, they can spread their roots in search for water and nutrients like they would in a real garden situation. So they only have what you give them. So if you don't give them anything, well, they will not perform to their best potential because they do need those nutrients. This is basically plant food, and they need food to grow healthy, to develop properly, to bloom abundantly, and to produce fruits and veg, if we are talking about edible plants. So really important to fertilize your plants to provide them with the essential nutrients that they need for their growth and development. Just wanted to give you a quick update on the spring bulbs as well. It's a shame that it's pretty cold out here today. We've had a really nice and warm spring temperatures, and these crocuses started to bloom, and it's a shame because due to cold temperatures they closed, so I can't show you how beautiful they are. But more and more spring bulbs are starting to grow finally, and here we have some daffodils that started to produce some flower buds already, and plenty of other bulbs that I'm really excited to show you later in the season. Alright you guys, it is getting a little bit cold out here, and I think it's gonna rain any minute now, so I should probably wrap this up. But wanted to say thanks so much for joining me today. Thanks for spending some time in the garden with me. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thanks so much. I wish you a beautiful day, and we'll see each other in the next one. Bye!